evening. So this is the start of our special meeting. Before I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, including time limits, I'd like to note that we'll be adding public comments under just after item 4, after we hold the public hearing on, yes. I want to rethink that. I started to say we would have public comments after we hold the public hearing on proposed parcel tax. I'm wondering if we should do it after item 3, after we have the workshop. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? That way, okay, sounds good. I take it back what I first said. So we'll add public comment for items not on the agenda after item 3 as we finish the Communication Resources for Schools workshop. Can I have a motion, please, to approve that agenda, including time limits with that addition?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, that carried. And we'll move right on to the Communication Resources for Schools workshop. And we have, hello, Tom DeLapp, and hi, Stephen Nichols. I'll just hand it to you. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and kick it off, and then Stephen will come in and talk about some of the work that he's been doing in the analysis portion. Again, let me explain to you who we are and what we do. We've been involved in communication work. I've been for 40 years. Stephen's can give his own introduction a little bit. I've worked with 450 school districts across California over the last 20 some odd years that I've been doing this through the firm Communication Resources for Schools. Prior to that, I spent 9 years as the Assistant Executive Director for ACSA, the Association of California School Administrators, and I was responsible for all of their marketing and membership and communication work. So well familiar with public schools. I come out of a background of dealing in public affairs type work. I had a publishing and communications business for a while where I worked with lobbyists and law firms and businesses, and one of my claims to fame is I published 70% of the legislators' junk mail constituent newsletters. You're welcome. You passed Prop 73. I had to get a real job, so I went to work for ACSA. And I travel extensively up and down the state of California, put in with ACSA about 500,000 miles. Last year I put in 100,000 miles traveling across the country because I'm the president of the National School Public Relations Association this year. So I enjoy the work. We do a lot of work where we come in situations that are complex. They're often sometimes very contentious. We do a lot of planning work, training, but we also do a lot of high-level crisis communication work when things go wrong. In this situation, we've been brought in to assist the district in analyzing its communication effectiveness. Does it have the tools, and is it using the tools appropriately? Is your infrastructure set up to be able to do that? And so we'll go through this analysis and we'll take a look at all of the different ways that you can communicate. One of the things we want to make sure of is that you have in place the systems so that we can then fashion messages and content and arguments that need to go into those systems. So that's kind of who I am and what I'm all about. We'll go ahead and run through this, and then we'll probably have an interactive time where we can answer questions and talk to you about it. Okay, does that sound about right? Great. Okay.
Is it not working?
Communications issue.
Am I on? Yeah, I'm on.
This could be Exhibit A.
Oh, that's not plugged in there.
That thing wasn't plugged in.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That'll do it.
There you go.
Now let's do it.
Now we're working with it. Okay, there we go. So, I want to use an analogy for you. And I think that Stephen and I have been working to spread this message throughout California and across the country. You have 4 table legs on your decision-making table. And you wouldn't think about operating a decision-making operation at your district level without at least 3 of those legs. The first is you got to have a CBO to run your business side and your finances. You have to have an HR person who's responsible for all the people, because we spend 90 cents out of every dollar on a human being. And then you need to have somebody who's involved in educational services, which is the product of what you produce. But to do all of this, you lean on a third leg, which sometimes isn't present, called communication. Communication is the hydraulic fluid that lets your system work. It sends messages and impulses out through all the pipelines that you've got to people, and it also listens back. It's like an ultrasound. You send a message out, electronic image, and then you get feedback and you know what you're doing. But if you don't have a table leg there, which is a strong communication process and program, when you lean on that part of the table, it collapses. So communication is, in fact, an imperative for you, because you can't just assume you can make decisions and things will work. You can't make decisions that you decide you're going to do a certain procedure or policy or implementation and just assume it gets through the system. So we have to regulate, we have to make sure that we're in fact supercharging your decisions by sending them out through an effective internal and external communication process. So a lot of what we emphasize is that you communicate with intention. That means playing offense as opposed to defense, being proactive as opposed to just reactive. You don't just work the baseline and return the tennis shot, you actually get the serve sometimes. Those kinds of analogies. But you are the controlling force for your messaging and your narrative, as opposed to waiting for people to talk about you. And I think the district is kind of been in a position where it's played more defense than offense, and it's played more reactive than proactive. So communicating with purposeful intention. What do we want our community to know? Have we listened to them enough to know what they are interested in? Are we aware of their concerns? And are we responsive? One of the techniques that we use is that you should speak, listen, and speak. So get your message out, then listen and see whether or not people are reacting to it well, and then speak again based upon that input. So it is a two-way communication process. That intention is not just a push, it's also pulling out of your community, sometimes in a very difficult way that you don't quite know. How are we getting information back about what our community and our stakeholder groups and our target audiences really believe? So that's something we're gonna be working on in the process of this. We also take a look at your systemic communication system, which is all of the different mechanisms that you would use to articulate your messages. Those could be electronic, they could be print, they could be meetings, they could be any of the ways that you gather input and you distribute information. And Stephen's gone through a process where he's analyzed some of that to determine, are you effectively healthy with the delivery system? It's like the interstate highway system for you. We haven't put cars on it yet, but we want to make sure that we've got track laid to all the destinations we want. Then we figure out how we're going to get messaging out through those systems. We have many challenges in the district right now related to three major big topics that I want to talk to you at the end about. And the first is your fiscal situation, and we need to have an entire initiative on discussing how you are putting resources towards results. The second is you're in a process of transition, and we need to be comforting our community and stabilizing their view regarding leadership. And the third is we need to become, in a sense, our own wire service. In an era when we're basically eliminating and becoming much more horizontal with a free-for-all with social media and everything else, we need to make sure that we are in fact articulating our own message and not relying on other people to do that for us through social media or through the press. Underneath all of that is building the capacity of the people inside the system to be good communicators themselves through everything from training, tools, and in fact, whether or not communication is just other duties as assigned or it's an assigned task. So we'll be talking about that. So as we move forward, we're here as your communication partner in this process to help work you through how to not only create from this analysis a good communication plan, but also to begin the elements of implementing that plan. We're not here to just tell you what to do. We're here to help you do it. So we're from Sacramento, and we're here to help. It's probably the words you don't want to hear. That's who we are. So this is my set of experiences. I've been in this thing for 40 years, and we're both accredited in public relations. Stephen, do you want to go through yours? Do it later. Okay. Communication is absolutely critical to your success. If you want to think about public relations, that's not a dirty word. Public relations is not the paint job on your system. It is part of your infrastructure. Most people think it's spin, it's putting a good face on bad situations. Some people even think it's misrepresenting systems. Public relations, the emphasis is on relations, building relationships of knowledge and support with various stakeholder groups and your general population. So we need to do that with very strong intentionality, and your success, PR is nothing more complicated than performance, do a good job, and then recognition, get credit for it. That's what PR stands for. So if you can do a good job, then we do all the things we can do to get you credit for it. So the most essential part of public relations is do a good job. And I think you're doing a great job throughout your school district. You have a blue chip school district. You have a district which is what we would refer to as a destination district. People aspire to be here either to work or to learn. And it is an asset for your community, which is an appreciating asset. It lends value to the community. It also contributes to the well-being of the people who live in your community. It is not seen as a problem as much as it's seen as a resource and an asset. So we need to make sure that those good news stories, your reality, what's right and what's real about your district is out there for the public to see in full view. This is not about just talking about what the good stories are, it's talking about what your condition is. And you are a strong district. You've got challenges like everybody else, but articulating those and putting them out there will be really, really important for us. So message management, speaking with one clear voice, articulating what your indicators of success are, and coming up with a way that we can measure at the end, do people know more about you now, or then, a year from now, than they do now? Do they feel stronger about you? Do you have more indicators of success that people are willing to stand up and defend for you, for example? So that's what this is all about. It is about getting your message out. It's about having one clear voice. One of the things that we emphasize is communicating from the inside out. It is important that our own people communicate our message internally, and we're not just dealing with people in the external community. Because if our own folks don't believe it, for example, let me illustrate with a story. We put out a story about how safe maybe your high schools are. And then I got a mother who's a teacher who's on the sidelines of a soccer league game, and people, the soccer moms come up and they say, hey, I saw this big report in the IJ about how safe our high schools are. And that soccer mom says, I don't know about that. I don't feel safe going out in the parking lot at night to get to my car. What do all the soccer moms think about safety in your schools? Because of one person. So we need our own people to be our best advocates as well. And some of that is we have to earn their respect, we have to communicate with them, we have to empower them, and we have to give them the capacity to be our best advocates. They have stories to tell, and we need to make sure that they're all contributing to talk about our public schools, not the public schools. And in fact, there's an analogy I use when I do training, and that is, if you put the word me up to a mirror, the mirror image of me is we. It comes back, so when you look in the mirror, you ought to say, hey, that's me, but what should come back is, how is what I'm going to do today lead to our success And if you flip it around, how is what we're going to do going to contribute to my success? We are in this together. This is not about one high school and a federation of high schools together. This is a school district. And so while we have pockets of excellence, things that we do that make unique to our identity as a school, we are all about being together. And we rise or fall as a school district on the basis of collective success. And that holds true within the schools themselves. It's not that we've got a great teacher in one department and we've got a lousy one in another department. We're all judged both on the strengths and on the weaknesses. So understanding that we as a team need to say our school district, not the school district, will become an important part of our measurement of success over this. So communication is critical to success. And with that, we're going to look at some things that are coming up, potentially boundary changes, any closures. Those would be things that we'd have to deal with. Program and personnel reductions. These are all tough issues that we deal with. Active shooter incidents. God forbid you ever have a situation where someone comes onto a campus. I've worked at Columbine High School. I've worked several other shootings. I've worked the Lyndhurst High School shooting. I've been involved in these things, and let me tell you, I look at every high school that has been involved in these, and I could transplant them right here to Marin County, and they would fit right in. You look at programs like wellness, you look at programs like mental health, you look at programs that relate to people about why we have active shooters. Some of those conditions can be transplanted anywhere in the country. So it's not a question in some cases of if, it's a question of when. And are you prepared? Are you ready for it? One of the things we deal with a lot is accusations of sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, how that relates to our industry. Right now, the Me Too movement is sweeping across the country through various sectors. We are not immune to that. We are in situations of delayed reaction where people are coming forward finally because they feel some shelter and some comfort in being able to relate experiences that maybe happened 10, 20 years ago. Those are real concerns for people. And how we as an institution address and deal with those will become important. The sexual misconduct issue is a big one. And at every given point, I'm kind of an expert on sex in schools. Sex between board members and superintendents, sex between superintendents and their cabinet, sex between principals and teachers, teachers and kids, kids and kids. It's tough. And that it leads to you being held accountable, because once those things occur, it's not about the perpetrator or the groomer or the person that posts the nasty pictures. They come back and they say, how did you not protect us from that? So our understanding of these issues is that we have to, in fact, communicate very well what is expected of professional conduct, how do we supervise and monitor, how do we screen and evaluate people. These are all big things. And you can rise or fall on the basis of a big case. It will define you. Social and political unrest. We're in a country right now that is losing its civility in the public debate. We have people on the left wing and the right wing talking at each other, not with each other. About 10% over here, 10% over here, and 80% in the middle don't know exactly which way the wind's going to blow. But at any given point, we engage in name calling. We engage in misrepresentation. This is an era of fake news. Fake news is nothing more than what you don't believe in. And so people in our society right now are creating silos of internet illiteracy. And we create a silo and we pour into it information that is part of our confirmation bias. Stuff we don't agree with, we don't put in our silo. And then inside that silo, we end up with an echo chamber effect because it reinforces what we already believe in from sources that we believe, and we disregard the rest of it. We don't really let other things in because we're in a situation where the way you receive your information used to be from a one-to-many system, Walter Cronkite with the news, but now it's horizontal, many-to-many system. And it's the wild, wild west on social media. The advent of the internet was an extinction-level event for print newspapers. They're probably going out of business. because they're all going to become electronic, and everybody, once they do that, they start to compete with each other. So we're faced with a situation where, in fact, how you get your news, how you get your information out, has to be controlled more by you yourself. But in this whole political unrest, we've got everything from, the Me Too movement to the enough people out of Parkland with the shooting and gun control. We've got issues related to political activity of one form or another, and it plays itself out through your school system in many cases. So we need to be ready for that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen. He's going to talk to you about the process of this analysis.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Tom, and good concept. And I'm not going to slide us back all the way. I'm Stephen Nichols. I'm Executive Vice President with the firm. Been working with Tom since 2014, all up and down the countryside. Haven't hit 450 school districts quite yet, but if you stay with him long enough, you'll see that he's serious. It's been about 50 different school districts that I've worked with over the years. We're in California. I work in New York City Department of Education, doing marketing out there. We're working in South Carolina, so we really get a nice cross-section, but I'm a hometown guy. I'm from Sacramento, California. Before I started with the firm, I actually had the opportunity to sit in that chair as a director of communication. I started at a small school, smallish for a Natomas Unified School District there in Sacramento. Moved over to Folsom Cordova, where I was there for 6 years, kind of grew that department. I started as a part-time employee, became a full-time employee, grew the department. Now the incumbent in that position has a staff of like 7, all in communication. So I've sat in that role to see how you grow this thing in a place where people aren't really used to it, and I could put some stuff into context. Finally, before I came here, I was a chief communications officer down in San Juan Capistrano, California. So spent about 11 years doing professional communication on behalf of public schools, and I do love it. I know that there was a lot of scary things that Tom talked about, social, geopolitical unrest, active shooters, things of that sort. When you become a person that gets the job, you're the director of communication, the first training you usually go to is that one. You're afraid that the school's going to catch on fire, the news is going to show up, and they're going to be expecting you to have a statement. Well, what I found, it's not that at all. Usually those kinds of things you can't prepare for, they do show up. What I'm going to show you today is what you can prepare for. What I learned from year in and year out is the ability to communicate in a crisis, a problem, bad day, whatever, is how tight your communication systems are. So I had the opportunity to take a look inside the communication systems here. I'll explain to you first and foremost what I mean when I say communication systems, and then I will get into some of the numbers of your own. You've got some pretty healthy numbers and robust situation there. So mass notification systems, that's how you communicate with the public. We call them robo-dialers, auto-dialers. You all are familiar with them, of course. You've got your Blackboard Parent Link. That's what I'm talking about. But your communication systems are also your media media relations, your regional considerations. You all are in the number 3 or 4 media market in the country, being right here in San Francisco. So there's some impacts, or in the San Francisco area, there's some impacts on attracting media when you've got good stuff. I mean, I'm sure you've had some really awesome things happen in your schools, and you've been trying to get folks over from across the bridge, and sometimes they don't show up. Now, when there's a national situation that's going on and it's bad and has to do with education, they want a local face, then they show up. And now you're on the 6 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news, and so you have to fight that, and you have to consider that as far as putting that together for your communication system. You've got public engagement, two-way communication. There's going to be some of it here. You all as a board, of course, when there's public comment, you can't reply like right away, but we all know how that works. The staff or people can come, they can tell you what's going on. That's actually public engagement right there. I don't have to tell you guys that. That's one of, when you have a communications person in the office, I sit and listen to public comment, almost as much as I do from board comment, because I know it's kind of a heat map of what's out there in the community and what they're saying about us. How are they reacting to some of the policies and situations we've got going on? More than ever, school districts are using social media. I was actually pleased in my initial assessment of this district that your superintendent's account, it looks like it's been going on for some time, since 2015. There's been almost 450 tweets, and they're tweets about stuff that's taken place inside the schools, reactions. That's the kind of stuff that people are really, really excited about, and people are using it. It's important to reach people where they are. Tom talked about the dying print, model of communication. Well, if people are using social media, it's important for us to reach them where they're at rather than expect for them to kind of learn a new communication system. So we're often tasked in the communications chair with writing newsletters, distributing newsletters, and getting them out to the public and saying, hey, look, we've communicated, we've done that, we checked that box. When what we find is that nobody's opening these newsletters. The click rates on them aren't as good as the short articles. So one of the strategies I used to do is I'd say, okay, I'm putting 5 stories in a newsletter in a week. Well, I'm going to take those 5 stories and I'm going to release them one by one, and each one's going to be a social media hit. So that's how I'm talking about using social media as a system for you, as a part of your communication system. So communication support, and Tom talked a little bit about this, districts expressed to us the intention of dedicating support to the communications function. Our efforts, our entire assessment is created from that lens, is to say, okay, if we were to come in and maximize the communication systems, set this district up for a good branding initiative, how are they doing right now? What are they using? What tools do they have in place? What systems do they have? Because we want to create the highest return on investment in this area. It's a critical objective for us to maximize the capacity to communicate. Powerful visuals are very, very important for people to see. Rich media content, videos for social media, so it's not just text. Pictures, especially group pictures. I always do this when people take a group picture, and when you're the person that's taking the picture at the restaurant for a group, right? When they come and they look at it and they see whether or not you're a great photographer, do you know who they're looking for? They're looking for themselves. People look for themselves first. It's human nature. So when we're doing communication on behalf of the school district, who do we want to show in these pictures? We want to show ourselves. And I'll break it up for us a little bit later. We've got so many stakeholders, but students in particular. When students can see themselves in the picture, they love it. And that's that becomes the brand of the district. We know that a comprehensive communication plan is essential in our work. I mean, one of the hardest things about that four-legged stool that Tom talked about, and I've sat on cabinets for over a decade, and being the only communications person, being basically the only generalist really in the district outside of the superintendent, not having a role that's specific to business or specific to technology. I learned that the way to articulate my value, the value of communication, is through a communication plan, because what it does is it orients the entire organization to really what we think we're trying to do through communication, and it holds you accountable because you put objectives in there. And when Tom said earlier we're accredited, basically all that is, well, it's a big deal, but the accreditation process is something that's not just for public schools, it's for public relations. And it follows a 4-step process of strategic planning, and we apply that to education, or to public relations here in this particular case. At the end of all of that is an evaluation, is how do we know we were successful? And I like that because you can say by the end of a period of time, we've had this behavior change amongst this stakeholder group by this change interval. That stuff is articulated in a communications plan. Now people can put communication decision-making a little bit easier, right? Because you can say, well, I've got numbers and data that show we were successful or not, and so I am going to put some money towards the communication thing. But in the past, it was more of that's an other value added kind of a situation. We don't want to take cuts from the classroom. My buddy here says that when the pie gets bigger or smaller, the first thing to go out the window are the table manners. He's right, because in recession, when I first started back around 2007, everybody's holding on. We want to cut positions, and if you can't show why communication is important or valuable, it's out. And quite frankly, that actually happened at a district. Before I became a PIO at Folsom Cordova, our position was cut and dropped down because of that situation. Well, as the recession ended, we didn't really get out of the woods. I'm talking to the choir here, talking to a school board, but we never really got out of the woods per se. But when we started to get more money back in the program, people started going crazy, and then it was like, okay, now it's my turn. So anyways, that comprehensive communications plan is going to become the essential piece for Tamalpais as it moves forward to manage, monitor, and evaluate your communication initiative. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Actually, I'll show you now. There's 3 parts to the communication house that Tom and me and those that are associates with our firm follow. We believe that communication has three things, and it's communication systems, which I'm going to be talking about today. I show this because I want you to see how it fits in context with the communication wheelhouse. There's communication situations. When Tom talks about an active shooter, very rare, but it's happening more and more, unfortunately. When Tom talks about a distraction that comes from a sexual misconduct or something of the sort, or when there's community issues, you guys are going to be talking about a parcel tax, for example. Those are communication situations that come up that require communication. They require the district to speak, respond, engage, and somehow. And so that's going to be the situations will leverage the district's time and its resources. So these communication systems are designed to help undergird that, to support that, to be the scaffolding for those situations, so you have a way to get through that very, very seamlessly. I wouldn't say it's going to be easy, but it's so much easier when you have a system in place that's healthy. And that last one is the communication strategy, the communication strategic planning. This is the first step in strategic planning. So when I take it back over to Tom, he's going to show you what some of the things that we're doing, that we've done, some of the things we're going to be doing as we go forward. It talks about communication planning, research, so me digging into the numbers and seeing how you guys are currently communicating. That's the first step of our communication plan. So that's well underway. So you all, and this was in 2013, but it's still on your website. So I'm imagining it is still active. It's called the strategic priorities. It was a grid there. I took a look at it. What I was looking for in particular were what was the board at the time, I believe it was 2013, but what was the organization saying it wanted to do, what was its strategic priorities as it pertained to communication. I think it's very important because if I'm up here doing an assessment to see how we can help you communicate, I want to know, what did you say about it? So what you want to do is utilize the most effective means of communication with the district's internal and external stakeholders, including websites and social media. Develop an understanding of the school district in all aspects of its operation. I interpret develop understanding of the school district as making sure that the people, your stakeholder groups, understand what it is that's happening inside. To provide honest, consistent, comprehensive flow of information about the actions and activities, policies, programs, and progress of the school. Actively seek information from the community. So it looks like there's a goal here to make sure that we've got some systems in place to galvanize people, to organize them in one location, and then create a conduit of information for us so we know what's going on, which I like, by the way. I think it's very good. And bring about community understanding of the need for continuous improvement and what needs to be done to facilitate that improvement. So it lays out a clear goal of making sure that communicate, and there were things you had planned for academic achievement and things of the sort, but right now we're talking about this. Communicating positive news about the district is important to building affinity for the community and its schools, and it has a direct correlation to helping you accomplish all these things. So putting out not just pictures where people can see themselves, but putting out consistent and positive information about the actions and activities. It's, it's a, standing room only in here, I'm joking, of course, but we do this work. This is high-level stuff that we're doing to manage the district. But how do the rank and file public, how do they hear about what it is, what decisions we're taking here? That's what your communication system is going to be set up to do, is to turn what is currently minutes and a memo on policy actions that took place by the board and the superintendent, and to turn it into actual real life stories and so forth. Any questions about that so far? Let me go over some axioms that we have for systems communication. Communication processes and tools that factor into the operation to connect with stakeholders. So I mentioned Blackboard. They're a huge company. They've been doing, and I'll go into kind of the features of the Blackboard product right now that you might not have known about. But that's one. You've also got your mass notification system, your website, so your content management system, your website. That's helpful. We talked about social media, using the board, any spokesperson response, anything that comes out of your mouth as board members in your remarks. That's actually part of the communication system as well. Students actually, especially at a union high school district, most of them are really have very robust video news programming at their school sites where they can go out and they can start talking about news. I found it's important to engage students in the news, in the flow of communication, because the students communicate to students in a different way, and those messages seem to get across. If you ever feel like you are outside of your generational cohort, just spend some time on a school campus with some of these high school students, because even me, who feels as a digital native very comfortable with these systems, kids are using apps and hashtags and everything else that I didn't even think of, don't even know anything about, and it's working for them, and they're doing it so much more quickly and so much more efficient. So I say, let's find out what they're doing and bring that a part of our system as well. It's two-way, so I already hit that one. It's consistent in its design and functionality. We're a small district. I'll talk about the numbers, but you have 3 comprehensive high schools. So those are individual. Redwood is different than your other 2. Each of the schools never forsake the individuality of a particular school. And I really learned that one the hard way. Coming from a cabinet kind of position, I would come in and say, okay, it's summertime. I've worked on a communication plan, and go forth and communicate principles and do it exactly how I intended it. Well, you can imagine how that turned out. What I found when I was successful is we went in and identified what's the ethos of this particular school? How do they communicate with each other? Some schools, you have parents who have kids in a middle school. Sometimes you have parents who, one kid's in middle, one's in elementary, one's in high school. Any of you been in that situation? Anybody had 2 kids in 2 different schools, even at the same level, you'll find that even in the same district, the principals talk to you differently. And so a good system of communication is consistent in its design and functionality, but it never forsakes the individual uniqueness of it. Connected to student information system, because I want the ability to reach parents in real time if there is a crisis. We want to not be going through the card catalog and trying to find people in that situation. And we also don't want outdated numbers or update, things that we can't reach. So having it connected to your student information system, that allows that to be updated in real time. And products like Blackboard work really well to make sure that that information is active and updated on a regular basis. The ability to target. I know that there's district-wide, we're talking from the district standpoint, but sometimes we need to be able to reach a particular school, particular grade level. So for example, when we're doing, it's part of our articulation from the 8th grade into the 9th grade. A lot of times the 9th grade counselors will go to the 8th grade schools and help the schools and the families get ready for, getting ready for high school. So they would come to me and say, we need to get an announcement. And I'm very serious about guarding the communication. I don't want people to become immune to the phone ringing from Tamalpais or any school district that I'm working for. So I always say, let's wait, to communicate unless we must, so that way people really, respect the phone call. So they wanted me to go call the whole school about one particular grade level. So a good communication system, mass notification system in particular, should be able to target down to the 8th grade, so I don't have to bother the phones and the ringing of other stakeholder groups, because then it becomes too much. Evaluated regularly. This is good. I had an opportunity to run reports. Your transitionary leadership has been very helpful. They gave me access to the back end of your mass notification system at least. And I've been able to go in and see How many opt-outs? And I'll show you what that looked like. How many messages have come out over the course of the school year? And that's me doing that. I can run those reports, but later on, there needs to be someone that's doing that on a regular basis. Maybe once a semester, but definitely after you send something really big. I always do like an after action if there is a crisis, gas leak up to, lockdown. Let's see how did communication happen in this particular situation and what can we learn from it. Easy to use for staff and parents is really the trigger. And honestly, I gotta say, I should put easy to use for, people say, parents, that's our primary stakeholder. But in this particular case, you need the staff to feel empowered to use the communication systems or else the tools aren't gonna work. Especially when you don't have a director of communication in the district. You need to make sure that staff feels empowered, that they know what they're doing, that they can use it. And so it's easy for them and easy for parents. So if they need to make a change, if they need to update their contact information, do they know where they can go? More importantly, if they missed a phone call, do they have to rely on the voicemail? Is there a way they can go log in and say, what did I miss? That kind of stuff. So we're looking for that. The last thing is archival, making sure that we can go back and check and see, if we don't have the ability to do an after action after every incident right away, let's be able to go in, hear the phone call, hear the way it came out, was it translated properly, et cetera, and now we can go back and pull that up. Sometimes, and this has happened one time, where there was a Public Records Act request that had, that was helped. How about I say it that way? The response to that Public Records Act request was edified by my ability to go back and demonstrate that we had sent information out about a particular topic. I could play it, I can show how many parents got it. That kind of stuff becomes valuable, and I got to high five for once in my life with the district council, because usually they take my words and tell me not to say certain things, and this time we were buds. So let's talk a little bit about your mass notification system. Blackboard Parent Leap has 22 different kinds of messages out, the groupings, and I created them, are outreach, attendance, and emergency, because there's so many kinds of outreach message. There's classroom behavior announcements. This wasn't going on in 2007 when I started with Blackboard and my first time doing this role for a school district, but now you don't have to have the teachers do the phone calls. It's just an automated thing. Jimmy wasn't in class today, or he was off task today. Number comes out, and then the parents have an opportunity to hear that. Library and cafeteria balances, this information is now going out this way. So the connectivity is being used in ways that hadn't happened in the past. There's such a litany of distribution channels nowadays. And I grin from ear to ear because we're communications people. So I want, real estate in every one of these bullet points, and I'd love there to be a TAM district banner. We corner the market share in phones. I've got 100% of the families on our phone. We've got most of our families' email addresses, most of their social media accounts, because these are the ways that we're going to be able to reach folks. And when I say it's time to put a message out to our community, because we can't wait for the local paper or the regional news to put it out there. If I don't have contacts in the distribution channels, what good is my communication system? So this is why we spend so much time seeing how well we're doing so we can ramp that stuff up. In TAM, there are 12,612 total contacts. I put an asterisk here, and I just want to make sure why I put that there. Because there's a difference between contacts and devices. And I'll show you devices later, and it's going to be like triple that number, and that's because multiple people have like 5 phones, you know what I mean? And they've got like different phone numbers and all that kind of stuff.
You're mobile in many ways.
Right. So we've got 7,100 about parent contacts. So that's good. You don't want it the other way around. At least 5,000 students, and each of them have at least a parent. So that's consistent. It looks right. Sometimes I find that number is wrong. What that would tell us to do is we need to go in and update our student information system. Because if there's somehow something is not being ported in properly, and a lot of times these are very expensive things, not in context for what they can do, but you want to make sure that you're using them accurately and adequately, or else it's a waste of public dollars. 474 staff contacts. So since the first day of school, and first day of school last year, I mean, I was running numbers actually through the summer, took a break, had conference time, had vacation time, and then came back and I updated again. I just went through to see if there were any messages over the summer. So these numbers are up through from August 1st, 2017 to Friday, the 27th. 1,686 messages were sent through the system. That is really, that's a lot of use. When you look at it and you break it down, for how often that is per person, it doesn't break out to be equally that way, but it shows high usage of the system. However, and this is very consistent with most districts, the majority of those were automated calls. So 800 of those were from attendance calls. And so, where's kids at? They're tardy or they're absent. This is huge. I'm going to show you again why this is important, how this all connects. I had to do the why is communication important. I had to start showing people how communication helps with average daily attendance. I mean, using these communication systems can drive up your communication for attendance campaigns. I mean, it's huge. You can use them using real data. You can set a real good attendance initiative. I did one in Gilroy, for example, where we used the data. They're one of our clients. So we used the data that they had on how their attendance was looking, and we said, okay, we're going to want to increase attendance on first day of school by 5%. So using their data, we were able to pull it and say, were we successful? Were we not? That kind of information is important and it's invaluable for us. If 48% were attendance calls, then the rest of them were emergency calls or outreach calls. Very, very few emergency calls. So 90% of the other stuff is your outreach calls. And these outreach calls were information about social issues. Let me tell you what I wrote down. There were 13 reasons why. You guys heard about that mini series that's going on. It's popular about teen suicide, and that's a social issue that's going on all over the place. And so I was really pleased to see that one of the schools, and I have like pages of the report itself that shows the line item by line item of all the things that were sent out. But one of those schools was using it as a parent awareness night. And they decided to say, parents, do you know that there's a series out there that you ought to know about? And so that's good, using the system to reach out. Impacts of marijuana legalization for high school. You wouldn't think that that's something that we need to have a community message out about, but it's something that parents needed to know about, in particular vaping among students. I'm sure this board has had a presentation or at least a public comment. I have seen it in every client district we've had where somebody has gotten up and talked about how vaping is taking place in as low as our elementary schools. And so, and it's like, this is back to me not being part of the generational cohort. Now they're looking like flash drives, USB, so they can just go on undetected. So I think that that's a good information about social issue that you're using your outreach calls for. Special events include prom, so I saw messages about get your prom tickets, AP exam windows, AP for a district. That's traditionally when you're in an affluent area, when you have a high performance, you've got kids that are doing excellent, they're going to Harvard or bust. So, I mean, AP is such a big time, and everybody wants to make sure that that's going on. So I saw messages going on there. And then awareness messages related to health and welfare. So there were messages in there about whooping cough or pertussis vaccinations, invitation to parent education regarding perfection and anxiety among students. These are messages I pulled straight out of the 1,686 messages. So I'm seeing a very healthy use of outreach messaging through your communication systems. This was shocking to me, and I need to look and make sure that this is actually correct, because out of the 54,000 total devices, so remember 12,000 contacts, that's how many people have 3 or 4 different devices. Only 182 of them voluntarily opt out. This is me with my graph. Thank you very much. It took me a long time to put this together. What we have here are less than statistically significant numbers. Overall, for phones, 24 opt-outs. So I'm like, is this okay? I mean, 151 for the text messages. Most of the time, people opt out of there because they don't want to have, data charges. But nowadays, most phone carriers, they don't even do that anymore. SMS is part of the package. And then email. I mean, that is insane. 7 people out of 20,000 email addresses opted out. So either people don't know how to opt out, because that happens, and we find that when we're doing our analysis of what we do, and that's okay, or I can make the assumption that the low opt-out rate indicates high engagement among all stakeholder groups. I did this on purpose because this is what communication planning is supposed to do. It's supposed to check this assumption. I should never be sitting in an office with public dollars spent towards communication and I'm throwing stuff on the wall to see if it sticks. I must know, I gotta know why. So the communication planning process will help us figure that out. We're gonna go figure out why is the low opt-out rate, what's the situation, were we well articulated. I really hope that at the end of the year, when we see the communication plan and we take a look at it, that this number doesn't skyrocket because I figured something out and told everybody how to opt out of our messaging. But if that number stays above 12,000, then we still have good engagement, right? Because that means that everybody in the system has at least a device where we can connect to. So we don't have to get long-faced yet. So here's some of the public relations benefits for your communication systems. Your outreach messages are designed to promote awareness. One of the things that I learned starting working with Tom, actually, is that, you have to, in order for people to like us, they got to know about us. So we starts with an awareness, then we build affinity for a particular issue or an organization. From there, people start to adhere to what it is that we're talking about. Finally, the best case scenario is that those individuals become advocates for us, for the system. That can mean that they're advocates by telling good stuff about the district, by telling a friend about the district so that they can want to enroll their kids here. But really just not working against us. But you can't get there until you get to the awareness. So using your outreach messages really do help. It's a huge strategy. It's a very common public relations strategy. Community engagement's another one that you hear a lot about. Media relations is another one. You dive deep into those things when you get into the communication planning. The outreach messages, I gave you better examples, so I'm not going to really go into that, but I call them high priority messages. Then the meaningful messages. So the high priority ones are school close. I went to undergrad and grad school on the East Coast, so snow days are my jam, okay? So we would get like a snow day. This is back in the early 2000s, but we would still get a kind of like a phone call from the university in DC. And when you get like 1/4 of an inch of snow in DC, everything shuts down completely, right? You guys know. So those are the ones that become high priority messages. Inclement weather, too hot, wildfires, so bad air quality day. We can't go outside today, so that's a high priority message. Meaningful messages related to curriculum activities, that's the prom stuff. But those are all clumped under outreach. Attendance messages, talked about that. They are alerting parents to who are not in school, not just for the day, but now they've gotten it down to the period. So if your kid you dropped them off at school for the first period and then they took off, you'll know that they weren't in second period. Attendance messages do drive awareness of student absences. I talked about that. It can reduce absentee rates, which increase average daily attendance, and they're connected to SIS. Your emergency messages, your weather-related, incidents that jeopardize health and safety. So that actually are like gas lined. I don't know how many. I never knew that when I started in school PR how much I'd become an expert and buddies with PG&E and all the people, because they come out and they have to we have to shut the school down basically to clear a gas line. You need to communicate that. The important thing is that your system handles the dissemination of these messages much differently, and they reach stakeholders in a priority fashion. So your outreach messages and your attendance messages, because you don't need 100 phone calls to say Johnny's not in class today. But your emergency messages, they're going to keep ringing you until somebody answers. or until they've had a successful route. So they've contacted every contact. I think that's really, really important. When I share that with principals, they're actually like, oh, I didn't know that, because there are times where I do want that message to go out in such a fashion. The converse is true. Sometimes they want the message to go out and they feel like it's an emergency because they're like, this is high priority for me. Graduation tickets need to be in. And what happened is they set it as an emergency, and now everybody's getting these messages at work, on all their primary, grandmas are being called. And so they do that once, and it's like losing your lines on stage. You'll do it once, it'll never happen again. You can use your communication systems for your branding initiative, and I'm going to turn it over to Tom here, back over to Tom in a second, but really the branding initiative means that your stakeholders, all of them, your teachers, all your staff, your classified employees, your leadership, the board is a stakeholder group in of itself, your community relations groups, all of you have friends, some of you are probably members of the Rotary or the Kiwanis and the Chambers of Commerce. Those are all your community stakeholders. But I always say, like, I give you these admonishments, but what I found in the last decade doing this is people don't realize that 2/3 of the people that live in the boundaries of Tamalpais don't have children in the school district or have school-age children. And so it becomes kind of a hard thing to communicate to them why they need to support things for their kids are already graduated, or they don't have kids. So you're saying, why do I need to be involved in this? So your branding initiatives are very, very helpful because they can demonstrate to the community that kind of return on investment. It shows that the district is benefiting the students, but also the community. Because again, when you have good schools, you've got good neighborhoods, you've got good home prices, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. Packaging and deploying material and marketing communication collateral is also a part of that. So you could do high-rich content like videos. You can put those videos on your website. You can put those videos through your social media channels, or you can leave them on video, engagement sites. I mean, YouTube is the big example, but you don't have to use YouTube. You can use other ones, put them on your website and host them. The goal here is just create content that makes people want to watch and want to engage. You know what I mean? So that way that they can hear what it is that they're looking for. So Tom's going to come back, and I have this slides. These are all available for you, of course, and any other questions that have to do with the findings or some of the reports that we use. Again, those are also available inside of your systems. Any questions about the assessment so far before I turn it back over to Tom? Because Tom's going to go over a little bit more about the Strategic Communication Initiative, what we've been doing over the last few months, and then kind of some of the things we're going to be doing going forward. So thank you for listening about that, because that's I get excited about this stuff, but it's kind of tough. So thank you.
Thank you.
The bottom line is this. I want you to remember that you have 20,000 email addresses. You actually probably have more subscribers than the local newspaper. You have multiple ways to reach people. You got 12,000 text message, cell phone capabilities. You can call them. You've got all of the devices. And if you look at your website as the central platform for what you're going to distribute, it's a repository of the information that you want to put out, whether it's operational information or it's information about how great you are. It's all in that one spot, and everything that you do, whether it's doing media relations or it's doing stuff in social media or it's doing stuff with your Blackboard system, they all tie back to this one place that you can control. And I think that's important. The other thing to keep in mind is that your parents, for the most part, are Gen Xers, but we also have millennials. How many of you subscribe to a print newspaper at home? Yeah.
Just Sundays.
Yeah, just Sundays, right. How many of you subscribe to a print newspaper at home? If you ask most of your teaching force, it will come out as a barbell. The older you are, the more you want the ink on your fingers because you want the crossword puzzles and the Sudoku. And the rest of them, it's old news because by the time it's in print, you've already gathered it through Facebook or whatever. So keep in mind your Your consumer base, which are connected to you directly, are using systems which are all based upon this weapon of mass distraction called your cell phone. It is a mobile device which gives you in your pocket the ability to be a TV station, to search anything you want from a Google search. It is an amazing device that gives us mass personalized communication. It also is a device that can become misused by people. They become addicted to it. It is intrusive. They can use it to isolate information they don't want to pay attention to. Our capacity on this thing is to harness these multiple tools that people have and to use them effectively for our purposes. So as we get into this too, keep in mind that your community is a fairly well-heeled community, so they're probably very adept at using these tools. And the 2/3 of the population to maybe 3/4 of the population that don't have kids in school, our messaging is as important to them as it is to parents, because we have to convince people to vote for other people's kids. That is the legacy of a great public school system, is that people actually approach it by saying our school system, not the school system, even if they don't have kids in it. We need to make sure that we're getting those messages out to our entire community about the value added that we provide as a school district to everything from safety in the community, quality of life, economic vitality, and the cost of homes. We're an appreciating asset. So we're going to be looking at how we send out sort of the instruction stuff. Good communication is like good teaching. The summary of this is basically it's like good teaching. First of all, you do your research. Figure out what you're going to teach and how kids learn, so you know your subject matter. Then you create a lesson plan. You don't just show up the first day of school and say, what should we talk about? You actually have a planned timeline of what you're going to do. You have pacing guides as to all the stuff you're going to take care of. And then you implement the best practices you can afford to do. And then you test to see if the little buggers learned it. So you go back through and you evaluate, did it work? Same thing with communication. This is part of our research component. We figure out how, do you have the system in place to do it? We're going to also do some message development with you and figure out what do you need to say, what needs to be said, what the public wants you to communicate about. And then we're going to come up with a targeted plan that has timelines, deliverables, measurable things. Implement that plan with best practices that you could afford, and then help you evaluate, did it work? We don't just go out and PR all over everybody. You don't practice ready, fire, aim. You have a planned process that you can really figure out what you're doing. So that's kind of where we are with that. Now, since the summer we got involved in this, we've been advising you and assisting you in communication work.
It says a little earlier.
Yeah. We've conducted initial interviews with key personnel. We've been involved in your mass notification system analysis, and we're starting on the process of developing a strong communication plan for you that will come forward, and we'll let you provide some input on that as well. And we're providing communication support during the leadership transition, helping them in the process of this. In the year ahead, we're going to look at coaching and training and capacity building for district leaders at the board level, understanding your communication protocols. How do you react when you get an email? How do you react when you get public comment? How do we as leaders become vocal leaders, respected leaders in our community? Keep in mind that the generation of parents we have right now, people are less likely to read things than they are to listen and watch things. So powerful video messaging, a video news release, if you will, might have more impact and sticking power because we're telling a story, and then we'll point people to, if you want the data, you want the deeper stuff, you can dive into that. But if we start by giving you a bunch of print materials, most parents right now are going to turn right off. They don't want to do the homework. So we got to catch them with information and layer that into them so they get more and more informed. We will work to enhance your social media component to make sure that you're using it. Now, I jokingly refer to social media as a relentless mistress, because once you get it on and you're there, you have to keep feeding it, because you don't get into social media and then out of social media. It becomes an ongoing way of doing business. So we need to make sure that we're consistent in how we handle that. How do principals deal with it? How do other staff? How do we engage with outside community social media outlets? Are people talking about us, and are we talking on their platforms or not? My advice is you never pick a fight with a man who buys his ink by the barrel or internet presence in gigabytes. We would talk about things that are misrepresentations on our own platform, not on somebody else's. Why should we drive their likes and shares and friends and the rest of that? So we play home games most of the time with information. We're going to make sure that the boardroom to backpack communication is streamlined. The way we're getting information to people so that it's easy, because after all, everybody's busy. You get together for your first meeting after the summer and you ask each other how you're doing, and the first thing you say is, I'm busy. Because if you aren't busy, you're a weenie. You got to be busy. Everybody is going to come back together as staff, and the first thing they're going to say to each other is, I've been busy. It's not like, gosh, got anything I can do? No. So we're also going to clarify the chain of command and protocols for communication, review your board policies and admin regulations on communication, and possibly look to the idea of routinizing how you handle the communication function. And that goes from everything from who has the other duties as assigned, right down to, do you have a communications office, and do you even have an individual responsible for that ultimately? You need to think in those terms, because you are a big issue, a big deal in your community. And if you undervalue communication, it's going to catch you later on, because people won't understand your messaging. So let me conclude with this set of comments about what I see for you. There are some really strong messages you need to deliver. The first is, the number one thing you have to worry about is community trust. Do they trust you? Do they trust you as trustees? It's in your job title. You're called trustee. Do we trust you? And trust is built upon respect, understanding, familiarity. All of those things are part of trust. And trust is a delicate balancing thing. You can lose trust pretty quickly. What happens is people don't start off trusting you, they start off neutral. And you do something to really tip it in your favor where they like you and they trust you. And then you do something wrong and they go, whoop, I don't know that I trust you. Like Tiger Woods, for example, made a mistake 14 times, but he made a mistake. We lost trust. So now he's got to climb uphill in public support to get that back. And it's a lot harder, I've learned as I've gotten older, it's a lot harder to walk uphill than it is to walk downhill. It's easy to fall downhill, it's hard to walk uphill. So we need to make sure that trust is the number one thing that we're building, the measurable thing that we'll be looking for in surveys and focus groups and analyses and stuff, is do they trust their school district more than they did before? It's not to say they don't trust you now, but trust is your currency as leaders. Number two, are they confident in you? Do they have a sense of confidence that you know what you're doing? That you have the systems in place to run the district, your finances are strong, your management structure is okay. Am I confident that I would invest in you? It's like we need to give them a portfolio of a return on investment that says you ought to have confidence in where we're going as a school district. Number three, you need to have respect, which is part of a reputation management. Do we respect you? You're working with a great product right now. Your system is producing graduates at great levels. You're doing great stuff. But that's something that you could lose if you're not careful. Manage your reputation. It is a strong asset that you need to protect. Are you reliable? Will you always kind of do the same things for me? And do I like those things? But it's not like you're just doing the same old, same old. But are you reliable? Can I trust you? Or does it depend on who I actually talk to? Am I getting multiple information from different people, different messaging? And the final big message is, are you giving me a sense that amidst some uncertainties, you're giving me stability. The message your public really wants right now is, can you give me a sense of stability over the next several months, of this next school year, and on into the future? That stabilizing message will be a very important one for us to convince your communities of. With all of that in place, these big initiatives that we'll be working into a plan for you is around the concept of fiscal management and integrity. That you, in fact, have a well-articulated plan for putting resources towards results. This isn't just about doing a budget, make sure it's balanced. It's about investing resources in the appropriate outcomes that you're looking for. You have a budget problem, and it's not a surprise. And we need to get that message out to the public that you aren't surprised by where you are. You made conscious decisions to do things. You've, in fact, amassed a reserve which you are using as prudently as possible to cushion economic uncertainty sometimes. You're good, prudent fiscal stewards. That message needs to come out loud and clear. You don't have a crisis, you've got a problem. Maybe you have a bad day, I guess, sometimes, but in that this was a planned activity. So your budget becomes a big message. How do we layer this out to people in a way that they understand? A lesson plan, school economics 101. And we get people with simple messages that they can carry away and deeper information if they need it. And so we're there to answer questions with FAQs, frequently asked questions, fact sheets, bar graphs that make sense. In other words, deliver the information in a way that's memorable to them. The second big initiative that we'll be trying to drive through is this year of transition, which actually could result in maybe a quarter of transition. We've got board elections, we've got a national midterm elections that are occurring, we've got other things that are occurring relative to the economy. Where's it going, where's it not going? Are we prepared in this leadership transition to really explain to people where we're going and why we're going there? That's part of confidence building. Putting a face on this transition will be important. So my advice is we need to make sure that we're giving you the kind of messaging that tells your community, we got this. We know what we're doing. We're moving the system forward. The third element is we need to stop playing defense and make sure we play offense, which means we're going to treat you like you're your own news station. How do we create this wire service about us? How do we use all of these massive tools that we have at our disposal to be proactive? We will talk about the question, the singular question, which is, if I had a choice, why should I put my kids in your schools? And everybody will have the same set of answers that they'll be able to use in that. We provide an excellent core, but we also provide an extraordinary level of options and opportunities for children to excel. We open pathways to the future, and we give them opportunities for success, unparalleled in many places. We need to also target your feeder districts so they understand the same messaging. When people say, what do you think about the high schools? Those feeders ought to be able to come back and resonate our messages as well. So they are a target audience for us. Seniors are a target audience for us. The animal clubs, the moose, the elk, the lions, those guys are all audiences for us. The faith community. All of these we're going to segment and get messaging out to. And then finally, we need to make sure that everyone in the system has the capacity to be a good communicator. So we give them templates, we give them talking points, we give them training on how to communicate effectively, and we give them the toolbox that helps them get their message out with their local story about how great they are. So that's kind of where we are. We're at this process where we're doing our research to get ready to come up with our lesson plan, and then we're going to go into class and we're going to start doing all of the deliverables that we can, that you can afford. My wife taught me this: not everything worth doing is worth doing today. So don't just go out and, PR all over everybody and do a bunch of stuff and then get halfway down the line on a lot of it. Part of our job is sustainability. How can we do things where we change the way you communicate that sticks, it stays, it gets replicated, it becomes a way of doing business as opposed to a project or a patch on. That's capacity building, and that's important for us as consultants, is to make sure you have ongoing ability to get your message out appropriately. So those are the big things. That's what we're working on. And luckily, we're not trying to dig you out of a big hole. There are other districts that are trying to get a reputation because they got a bad reputation. You have a good reputation, which means you've got some stuff at risk. If you can't sustain it, you're going to be having conversations about parcel taxes and all the other things that your community believes in. And we need to make sure that that community understands the valuable asset that they have and whether that's an investment worth not only making, but an investment worth preserving. So the strength of our messaging this year, as your advisor and consultant and partner, is how do we maximize that return on investment so that everybody in our community says, absolutely, we love our school system. We think it's doing great things. How can we help? How can we vote for other people's kids? And with that, I'll open it up. We can talk about if you get any questions, get any things that you'd like to add as board members. I hope this has been helpful as an overview for you. Understand that we are throwing our shoulder to your wheel to make sure that you can communicate better and communicate more consistently than maybe you have in the past. Leslie?
Thank you very much. Since this is more of a workshop format, I don't think we need to roll call. Does anyone have any questions? We'll just open it up. How's that sound?
This is so exciting. Thank you both for all of this analysis and information. I think it's something that we've all been wanting to hear. Well, I'll speak for myself. For 4.5 years, this is, we know how important communication is, but it's something that we as a district have struggled a little bit with. So I'm so appreciative for any help that you can give us, and thank you for that. I have a question, a practical question about, you kept saying that we are going to help us and, lean your shoulder into the wheel. I'm wondering, we do not have a communications director, as you well know. We have several things in place currently to get our messaging out, as you know, but we don't have a person. And I'm wondering if, what are the next steps from here for what do we do? What do you recommend we do now to get a communication plan in place and keep the wheel turning?
One of the things, and I'll turn it to the interims. I like that. We got interims. It's like you got 2 6-shooters at your hips. That's great. So we're going to talk to this. It's like the Supremes, except you're not 3 of them. So. First of all, we don't do a communications assessment to build us in as the after action. The ethics of that is we tell you where you are, and then we let you decide where you're going to move. We are capable as your advisor, though, to move into a second level contract with you, which is to actually do some of this stuff to get it ready and get it going. We frequently will create the capacity for a district to end up hiring a director of communication, which kind of seems odd because we put ourselves out of business. And we've done this probably 30 or 40 times across the state of California, where there are people who have jobs as school public information officers, directors of communication, chief communication officers, which we used to do all that work with them, but we've developed the capacity for them to do it themselves. Our job is to enable you to have sustainable ongoing communication. And if you can do it homegrown, and you can do it with your own staff, you can do it with your own system, that's our ultimate objective. But next steps would be working with your interims to come back with a contract on what would it take to implement, craft and implement a pragmatic communication program for you. And you're going to have to figure out how much you can afford and what are the we'll help you identify the targets of opportunity which are highest yield for you at this point. And you can layer that out. You don't have to do, like I said, not everything worth doing, it's worth doing today. But you got to figure out what are the things that are most important for you to do, and you work with engaging your stakeholders in that process. But I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Well, I would just say that I wrote a little note here to agendize this on tomorrow's cabinet and review what we've heard, digest it, think about next steps.
Thank you.
Was that responsive? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I love another comment, I love focusing on all the great things we're doing in the district. I think that we have been, for a very long time, reactive, and the idea of our own wire service, which actually sounds antiquated, but, driving the message is very exciting and necessary, so I
We
like
want to
that.
set that informational table that everybody eats on. We don't eat off of somebody else's table. We lay down what you're all about, and then people react to us. They react to what your messages are. So the conversation is not them triggering something that they think is important. We lay down what we say as priorities and what should be the public narrative, the dialogue, and then other people react to that. That's kind of our goal. Others?
You know, when we look at the voter lists that the registrar of voters puts out for the most likely to vote, the people who voted in 3 out of the last 4 elections, it really skews to older people.
Yes,
I mean, it's just shocking to me that people 45 and below, where are they? What are they doing? They're not voting. So it's clear to me that we really need to get the message out to a block of people who don't have kids in the school and need to understand the value that the school brings to them. I mean, I think that has to be a huge part of our messaging. Not the parents so much, not the people who are familiar with the schools, but the people who are unfamiliar and are going to be out there doing the voting.
Absolutely. One of the interesting things is that your regular consumer base are not the people that turn out to vote as much. So you have to deal with them as customers. But then the people who are actually going to decide things, big things like electing trustees and voting for parcel taxes and bonds and things like that, those people have no direct experience inside your schools now. They do drive-by decision-making. So if we're not communicating in a targeted way, and one of the ways we do that is you buy things because you look for endorsements. You buy tennis shoes because, somebody wears them. You buy fashion clothing, you buy a car because Matthew McConaughey's driving real cool in it, that kind of stuff. I mean, we need the people who they would identify with, these non-parents, who say, I think our schools are amazing. I'm the president of the Chamber of Commerce. Let me tell you, the value they bring to our community is enormous. Or a realtor that says, you can basically count on the value of your home on the basis of the quality of the schools and what they provide. We have safe communities. Your law enforcement people endorse you. In other words, we look for the key communicators who would line up behind you if you're having a news conference, and they would all say, amen, brother, I love my schools. So we need to find the people that other people pay attention to in those stakeholder groups and have them stand and deliver for us. That's part of this building awareness, affinity, adherence, and finally advocacy. That will be our objective as one major push in this communication plan, is how do we reach them? How do we get to them? How do we make sure that they know what's happening? And it's not about calendars. Calendars are for the parents, that we have an event at a school. If I'm sitting in a senior citizen's place, I'm not going to care about an event unless you're coming to me with kids who are going to help me do stuff. So what we need to do, though, is talk to them about the value of what this means for their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren, and what that means for the fabric of the community, which they've invested themselves in. So we talk to them in terms that they would understand. We make it powerful, and we tell stories. You don't remember data, but you do remember stories. And they all have a story about that one teacher that made a difference in their life, or that one counselor that took them on the road and change the path and trajectory of their life. We have powerful stories. That's what we will sell out there into your non-parent community. You're absolutely right. In this community, we have to convince all those folks that they need to pass on the legacy and they need to vote for other people's kids. This is not about winning an election. It's about winning hearts and minds. Because people cast 2 votes in an election. The first vote is whether they like you at all. Then they cast a vote on whether they like the measure specifically. If they don't like you at all, they're not going to vote for anything. So we need to make sure they have a basis to make good choices, which is based upon knowledge, not rumor. It's based on fact, not, supposition. And it's based upon a good feeling about their schools, that they say, those are my schools. Those are the schools maybe I grew up in. Maybe they're the schools that my kids went to. But I believe in them because they're of value to me. That's the powerful message we need to get into them. And in some respects, we need to invite them into our house. We can get them inside, do principal for a day kind of things, or teacher for a day, or, have our kids go and do the string quartet in the homes and, gather people around and listen to them, tell stories. Though a variety of ways to engage that population more. But that can't be just pick them up and put them down. There's got to be a systemic way to connect them to you. Was that helpful? Mm-hmm. Good. Others?
Okay, I have a question and a couple comments,
Sure.
or maybe 2 questions. One is, to whom did you speak when you said key stakeholders? Who were they?
Who are the key stakeholders? Well, your stakeholders will be your religious leaders in town.
No, but
Oh.
people to whom you
We did our
spoke.
assessment, people
Right.
that we spoke with.
Oh,
as we
yeah,
were
okay.
Yeah,
things.
who were
Great.
they?
For president, former superintendent. Those- yeah.
We've talked to your interims. We've talked to a couple of the board members. We've been involved. We've talked to your legal counsel. Did that a lot. And now we're going to go into the process of possibly even getting out further to talk to principals and others. But that's part of an ongoing assessment process.
I got access from, whose office we were using?
Yeah, Tara.
Terry. So we've been in communication to get information and so forth. But as far as key personnel at the site level, for example, when we got started, we weren't able to talk to anyone at the site level due to the time and so forth. But in order to accomplish what we accomplished, that's the personnel that we spoke with.
What this wasn't was a communication audit. In an audit, we would typically have focus groups. We would pull people together over a period of time. We might do survey data research, that kind of stuff. We will analyze any surveys you've had, and you've had a couple of them here that we're going to take a look at. But those aren't necessarily internal as much as they are external. As we get further into the process on the communication evaluation, there will be opportunities to engage in focus group work later on to say, are things better? Do you know more? What do you still want to know more about? We'll do some online stuff, which is capable of getting opinion. But in this one, we didn't go the front end with a big audit. Partly because we didn't think one, for time, and 2, for cost.
Okay, along those lines, I ask that because the implications, you talk about coaching and capacity for leaders and staff, and that has direct implication for presumably Ed Services organization. So there's some impact on you for that. Okay, this is totally old lady country. This is way back. So how do you, now mind you, you've just spent an hour plus talking about, you really answered it. However, there's a little bit more I want to get out there. In my experience, typically, the superintendents did this function. Is that fair to say? In times past, it was a characteristic or requirement that a superintendent, A, could write, B, took on that responsibility. Is that still, that's still old school, right?
It's not old school, but even more than in the past, it means building relationships with a wide group of people.
And that, would you say, is characteristically different than we've had to do in the past.
We had to do it in the past, but we didn't have everybody with instant communication,
Uh-huh.
able to spread things quickly. But yeah, I think it'd be the role of your permanent superintendent to make sure that he or she understands that.
Because we're going to be spending, we have, and justifiably so, the kind of resources to build this capacity so that we do have this sustainability. We all agree that this has been an issue for us for a few years now, and it's very important that we can see some traction here in making the kinds of changes that are visible.
I think, if I could respond, I think one of the things that I've also observed is that in the absence of a communicating culture inside the staffing function, the board members have had to step up way too much to try to figure out what they're saying publicly. And so you get, people bang on your drum to try to get you to say something. And you can only talk as an individual member unless you're authorized to talk as the board. And the function of communication is mostly going to spearhead through your superintendent, down cascaded through the system, but it needs to not leave you behind. You need to have points that you can raise because you're out there with the public. You deal with stakeholder groups all the time, and people say, hey, what do you think about this? Our job is to arm you with a kind of persuasive information that you can tell a story, give us evidence to back it up, maybe have a case study to prove it, and then ask them to help with it. So as people contact you, it's not like you go, I don't know what's going on in the system. You're actually 5 key communicators that we can use in the system to communicate because you already have a network out in the community. But mostly it's managing the function of operational communication and message management that will fall to your superintendent. I did a survey of search firms when I was with the INSPR board. This is about, maybe 10 years ago. And I called all of them, like 40 of them across the country. And I talked for 45 minutes with them. And I asked them, what are you looking for when you hire a superintendent and stuff like that. And I finally got them back down to when, after we'd had this whole conversation, they told me, almost to a person, the number one thing that they look for in a candidate who's going to either keep the job, get the job, or the next best job is their capacity to communicate. It's not about being great at balancing a budget, instructional leadership. It's going to be, can I communicate with the board? Can I communicate with my cabinet? Can I communicate with the sites? Can I communicate with the rank and file employees? Can I communicate with parents, the press, interest groups, politicians? When you can't communicate as a leader, that's usually the indicator. So the number one characteristic that ought to be on your punch list as you go to evaluate people is, are you a communicator? And can you communicate well, articulately, verbally, in writing, in meetings, collaborating with people, enlisting people to also communicate with you? That's an important function.
Let me say this as well. I'm going to speak up.
You should go to the microphone because we're
Recording. Yeah, Stephen Nichols. Very good question, and I think the expectation of communication should be in the superintendent. Much like the superintendent in almost every district that I've worked at, I've only had one where the superintendent was not the instructional leader because they were a business leader before she became the superintendent, so she was our CBO. But much like there's an instructional leader out of the superintendency, that individual is not running ed services. And so what we find is that the individual has to have a real strong handle on communication, real strong handle on human resources, real strong handle on ed services, but they're not running those things. So I think that the way that education's changed, and especially the district that I was at was, when you say old lady country, I started at that job when I was, pretty green, and everybody my senior was like 40 years over, next to me, 40 years more than I was. And they asked the same thing. The superintendent is the communications person. What we find now is that the person who takes the chair as the permanent superintendent needs to know how to leverage everybody at the cabinet table, leverage the communication function. So they might be the ultimate communicator in chief, but the person that is marshaling the communication systems, when the superintendent is off to go do other superintendent tasks, the person that's behind is the one that's making sure that this system is following. So I wanted to add that in there because it hasn't changed where the communication function is no longer in there. In fact, Tom was just presiding at the Innsbruck conference in Anaheim, and every year we give a superintendent an award that goes with the superintendent and the communication professional, and about how they work together to communicate on behalf of the district. So it has very much become a pair. It's a two. So I wanted to say that.
Okay, one more, and I have one more thing.
Stay close.
What's the overlap in terms of the work that the parcel tax committee is doing in terms of public relations? Are you guys, sounds like the second piece of this was intimately involved with the kind of work we're doing around our messaging around that?
Let me tell you this. They don't overlap, they butt up against each other. One of the things we don't do is get into the business of encouraging people to vote.
Okay.
What we can do is tell them how great the system is, what the implications are of a parcel tax or any elected situation. But it's just like when you're going to pass a bond, you can say everything you want to say about the effect of the bond, right to the point where you say, and therefore go vote for it. So that's what we don't get into. Certainly the people on the campaign side are going to be listening to what we do, are going to be looking at the stuff that we do. Our stuff would work and will be out there whether or not you had an election going on or not.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, but definitely from a legality standpoint, we
Right.
got to keep the two separated.
Thank you.
So I have two questions, and I think the first one might be something that you'll figure out in cabinet, but it has to do with schedule. Kind of building upon what you just said, even if there were not a parcel tax going on, I think we have witnessed that it's clear that some of the messages have not been reaching the community with all of the work that has been ongoing in the way of the fiscal work, and it's clear that not everyone is aware of that none of this was a surprise, kind of what you were saying earlier. So with that, if we did not have November, I assume you'd be looking at a schedule for looking at our communication plan kind of holistically, but we all know that we have some priorities that we need to make sure that real information is on that website, that everything's very clear, and that the timing of that whole November election, I'm assuming you'll be working with in cabinet. Okay. And if you have any recommendations, and I'll let you work with the superintendents and cabinet of the best way to proceed so we can get the facts out, that would be helpful.
Good impulse control. That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Go back to the superintendent.
And then my other note was that it was something you and I had the pleasure of asking you about. It was more in the hallway, but I want to share it with the other board members, and it was shortly after the shooter in Mill Valley. And it wasn't just the communication. We did our communication very well, as did the elementary school. But what I noted, because I happened to live up the street, I was getting conflicting information from law enforcement about shelter in place, and when they did come up with the perimeter of the zone and told people where they could be. But as you pointed out, law enforcement had a direct line to our district, and our district knew that. But what happened was that, and we made the right decision, I'm sure, but we continued on with our after-school activities, whereas not everyone in the community did. So it seems like it's not just the communication, but there's a policy side and a side of looking at perception and safety that I think would be really helpful to get your expertise on. That may not be that top priority, but if I just request you put that in your head that we could use some help there, I think. I don't know if the other board members agree, but.
Emergencies put high definition transparency on everything you do.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's somebody who shows up in every high profile situation, and her name is Ida, woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah,
And Ida,
right.
woulda, coulda, shoulda,
Yeah.
second guesses you and 20/20 hindsight, and is willing to make decisions 24 hours after you had to make them. And I think part of what we need to make sure of is that we have built in the muscle memory of how to respond to these high-profile situations so that people's impulse, their reflex action, is to do the right thing. And then we communicate amongst ourselves as quickly and effectively as possible with either talking points or non-talking points so that we're consistent. And we have to be kind of joined at the hip with law enforcement as they deal with this, because they can't talk about us just like we can't talk about them. But we also have to talk the same language so that when people are hearing stuff, it's like in wildfires right now up north.
Right.
It's absolutely critical that people are getting consistent messages from every source that's out there. And, you know, their schools are at risk up there as well. And how are they communicating? Are they open? Are they not open? What are they doing? How are they handling all of that? Emergencies really are high-definition things, and we have to take them very seriously. But yes, you're right. We need to make sure that we're talking with one clear voice. Others?
Any other questions?
You know, with respect to the coaching, training, and capacity building, how deep does that go?
It depends on our assessment of what your team already has in place, and we'll probably be having some individual conversations with principals and some of the central office cabinet folks. And then we'll figure out, are there things that they need about how to handle reporters' questions, or the things about how do we engage with social media. Simple things like maybe writing the most effective email. You know, there's a whole process for writing email that most people don't follow. Because email is now the business letter of the 21st century. You know what the E stands for in email? Evidence. Not electronic. Because 20% of all of emails being subpoenaed by the courts right now. I mean, you look at email that's being harvested, your Public Records Act requests and things like that. Just god-awful amounts of email. So how we write email becomes an important maybe skill that we need to develop in people. Some customer service stuff that we might need to think about, that kind of thing.
It's specific to the scope. Whatever the training is, has to be specific to whatever the scope of work is. So I think that you're right. The next steps is to hear from what Cabinet wants to do, where they want to go with this as far as what are the priorities, and then we'll build whatever training program we need to help get the scope done. So if the scope includes messaging, then we need to train on that particular thing. That's what I mean.
Thank you.
And you mentioned that with the social media component, you have to keep feeding it.
Yeah.
How do you envision that playing out? I mean, certainly we don't want a superintendent tweeting at 4 in the morning.
We don't want anyone tweeting at 4 in the morning. You're right. I mean, I think what my suggestion is always to school leaders, if you write it once, step on it 4 or 5 different ways. Is that going to become a speech you deliver to the Rotary Club? Is that going to go out as an email blast to people? Be careful, because people don't want to be called on little mundane things, because when they get a phone call and it interrupts a business meeting, they get all torqued because I jumped on my phone. Maybe they want a text message that they can regulate. Text messages can't be that long, because I don't want to do this all the time, scrolling through to read my text message. Are we driving people back to posted materials? I mean, all of these are different tools that we use. But my advice is, if you've got a message you want to put out, you look at that system which has your website at the middle, and you figure out, there's 6 different ways I can do this. That's maximizing the time. But then the other part is coming up with that drip irrigation system of getting messages out regularly, as opposed to one big flood that you send all at once on a big issue. I'd rather grow my grassroots deep through drip irrigation than put a flood down on you and hope that it grows through the rest of the year. But we tailor that, but lots of different opportunities.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. You have a wonderful school district. We've enjoyed working with you. You guys have good messages that you need to send out, and we're here to help. So
Thank you. It was very helpful.
thank you.
Thank you.
Be in touch.
Thank you. So this concludes the workshop section of our meeting, and we'll be moving on. The next item will be the public hearing on the proposed parcel tax. However, we did amend the agenda at the beginning to include public comment on any items not on the agenda. So the purpose of this item is that it allows the public to speak before the board on an item that there may be some concerns about or information you'd like to share with the board. And we hear your concerns. We do not dialogue with you. We're not allowed to by law because it's not an agendized item. If it's an item that we sometimes will clarify at the very end, or we'll ask the superintendents to follow up with you on, but I just want to make that clear, that because it's not an agendized item, the board does not deliberate or discuss. So that's what we'll do first, and then we will open up a public hearing for people to make comments on the parcel tax, and then we'll close that and we'll have the consideration. We will be doing 3 minutes. Thank you. And Mary O'Leary has a 3-minute timer. We have 3 minutes for public comment. So anyone that would like to make a comment, you're welcome to line up here to the left and approach the podium, and please identify yourself, and we'll go from there.
Your agenda says 6:45 for the start of this meeting. Can we start it early?
We're not starting the public hearing early. We're starting the public comment at 6:44. And whoever comes at 6:45, if they want to have a public comment on items not on the agenda, they'll be here in time. So no public comments on items not on the agenda. Okay. Okay, can you please approach the podium and identify yourself?
My name is Ava Crisanti, and I have been trying to re-desegregate the Tamalpais pool since June of 2017. I have repeatedly asked the board since May to explain a very curious, apparent lie told by one of your employees, Ann Jaime, at the October 10, 2017 board meeting. She claimed, in defense of your segregated policy of the Tamalpais High School pool, which had been racially integrated for over 5 decades, that the reason it was shut down is because it had been, when it was racially integrated, it had been a, quote, free-for-all, and a child had drowned, a child named Frankie Reelan. For 6 months, I searched for this Frankie Reelan with county officials. I found no evidence of that. I finally went back to the board, I believe, in the beginning of May, and I said I can find no evidence for this, even after searching through the coroner's records very diligently. And I was told that you had no record of this. I have repeatedly returned to the board for an explanation. The only explanation I've been provided is that you cannot comment on what any individual says at a board meeting, but this is your employee on videotape on the October 10, 2017 board meeting telling what looks to be a whopper of a lie. I'd also like to point out the lack of effort on the part of the board to simply, in a very simple way, just correct the record. You sent me on a wild goose chase looking for corroboration of Ms. Jaime's lie. It brings up a lot of questions about the inherent bias at Tamalpais High School, the institutional bias, the institutional racism that implies. We do have a pretty severe problem. I guess we're voted dead last for equity of California counties, and I believe Ann Jaime's lie represents that pretty thoroughly. I don't think it's unreasonable for this working class taxpayer to expect an answer from the board on what she meant by that, and why that was allowed to go for so long without correction, and why the onus was put on me to disprove her lie instead of you're simply just saying, you know what, we don't know why Ann Jaime said that, we don't know the basis of it, we'd like to correct it as soon as possible. And I would like an investigation of, I've heard other comments about Ms. Jaime's teaching style and about her bias. I think it's appropriate for the board to look at what sort of person would actually take the time, what sort of employee that you have had for years take the time to come up and fabricate a story, if that's indeed what happened. I haven't been provided an explanation. I think it's a reasonable request. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll provide a clarification. The Tamalpais Union High School District hired an outside independent investigator and did a thorough investigation and had no findings. The school continues to value the work of all of our employees, and any information we've heard at public comment had no bearing on that investigation or the results. But thank you for your comment. Any other comments?
You know, Leslie, before you move on, I just want to say something about civility. I just want to say that Ann Jaime is a very well-respected member of our faculty, has been for a number of years. She's taught my children. She's an exceptional teacher. We're very glad, very happy to have her in the district. And there may be a disagreement about a particular issue for which the member of the public, of course, can have a disagreement about us, but certainly with respect to everybody ought to know kind of the contributions that Ann Jaime has made to our kids over the course of the years.
Thank you very much. Now I will open up the public comment. They'll hold the public hearing on the proposed parcel tax. It's a little past 6:45. It's closer to 6:50, so we'll still run this for at least 15 minutes. So I welcome anyone that would like to make a public comment on the parcel tax to please come forward and identify yourself. And again, you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
My name's Mark Colombo. I'm a parent of a student here at Redwood High School who's been in this district, well, one of your feeder districts since kindergarten. I'd like to address the board specifically about spending. You're running into financial problems for the same reason that people that are overweight run into weight problems. More money is going out than is coming in. Just as people that are overweight have more calories coming in than are being expended, okay? A parcel tax is probably the most regressive tax available to the school district. You have options for ad valorem taxes for capital improvements as well as technological improvements that require only a 55% threshold and fall a little bit more fairly on members of the public than parcel taxes. I think it's apparent that particularly around Redwood High School, we have parcels as small as efficiency condominiums in the Pixley Arms apartments behind the Corte Madera post office to perhaps the most expensive parcel in the entire school district, which is the Village Mall, okay? It is incomprehensible that those two parcels should pay the same parcel tax. The board has at its disposal the ability to propose a parcel tax that is based on square footage of improvements. I submit that that would be a much fairer way to reconcile the budget deficit that the school district is facing. I see no evidence whatsoever that the board has considered that. Your proposal does not talk about a square footage parcel tax. I'm well aware of the Baracus decision. Square footage parcel taxes are not precluded by that decision. The Government Code 55079 was amended in 2015 to take account of the court decision. All the Baracus decision requires is that all parcels be treated uniformly. You could propose a parcel tax based on the square footage of improvements on that parcel. If there's 1 million square feet of improvement, AKA a village mall, they would pay a bit more than someone living in a 600 square foot condominium. I see I'm running out of time. If it's $5 million you need to consider shoring up the budget, you have options at your disposal. And I'll rattle them off quickly. You could close San Andreas and Tamalpais High Schools, boom, $5 million saved right there. You could renegotiate the teacher's contract, offer to pay them more if the class sizes go up. You could defer hiring a superintendent and instead rely on the retired superintendents before you at a reduced rate of pay. There are ample opportunities for the board to save money. I don't believe that a regressive parcel tax is the best way for the board to consider closing the budget gap. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you raising your hand because you'd like to make a public comment on that? Please come forward. Thank you. And could you please identify yourself? I know you were here last time.
James Holmes, Larkspur.
Thank you.
Class of 71, Redwood, for what it's worth. I gather that the public comments here are taken in advance of the staff report. There isn't a staff report and then public comments?
The superintendent will be providing a summary for the parcel tax options. That's correct.
But public comments are requested prior to the
Yes,
staff
this is the hearing
report.
portion. Thank you.
If a special tax increase is indeed essential to the district's financial health, then the board members should be willing to consider all reasonable means to increase the chances of that success. Both the board and voters like myself wish the district well, but we keep hearing all sorts of things that range from apparent classic indicia of management problems such as fiscal instability and top management turnover to the genuinely noir incidents such as alleged sex harassment of teachers and even racial segregation. I'm not in a position to address or resolve those allegations. I can say that with full respect and appreciation for this clearly conscientious and hardworking board, but with primary concern for the district's financial well-being and public confidence in it, I believe that a key factor in maximizing the likelihood of successful passage of a parcel tax would be the prospect that more money would be accompanied by a new board majority and a new spirit of stability and genuine transparency. Without that added inducement to vote yes, I fear that many wavering voters may well wonder, why pay more for just more of the same? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I sense more comments coming, so I-
Dan Oppenheim, parent of a student here at Redwood. Just want to briefly comment that what we're talking about in terms of this would be $12 a month per parcel. It's not an exorbitant amount. I'm on the record in the past of saying should go for more. Certainly I think people live here because they believe in the schools, believe that having good schools in the area lead to better communities, and also support property values. So would encourage you to go for this as is, and also consider not just doing it for a short period of time, but given that there could be a different economic environment 4 years from now, do this with a renewal of the existing parcel tax to continue it further, rather than just having another issue like this just 4 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
Mamie Willard from Kentfield. While reserving judgment on the parcel tax overall, I would like to commend you for 2 elements of the proposed resolution, which is in the staff report. The first being that you reduced, or staff is proposing the reduction of the term from the prior resolution of 12 years to 10 years, which is more appropriately aligned with the visibility of the students who are out of diapers and headed to high school. And number 2, to select a cost of living increase that's clearly defined as a 3% figure, which probably is in line with the growth in people's income within the county. So those elements are considered to be a positive development relative to what you might have considered in the past. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Bill Levinson, Larkspur. I am here on behalf of my first grade and fifth grade grandchildren. I'm a retired senior living in Larkspur. The TAM district has had a long history of defining and seeking educational excellence for its children and going out and seeking the funding to support this educational excellence. In fact, it really started with Superintendent Walt Buster over here many, many years ago when he proposed the first parcel tax to be passed by the TAM district voters. And it was, of course, successful, and I think the district has passed 3 or 4 parcel taxes since, 2 bonds, foundations at each of the schools, very active PTAs, and every little group has its own support system. I really think it's important for the board to identify a parcel tax amount that will allow the district to maintain the current program for at least 5 or 6 years or more. Not expand it or enhance it, but maintain the really outstanding program that you have right now. And once the board passes this resolution, I think it's incumbent upon each of the board members to go out and actively campaign for the success of this parcel tax. The superintendents are not allowed to do that, but board members are allowed to do that. And I think it's important for you as a group to stand behind the decisions that you make and go out into your respective 16 communities that comprise the TAM district and make sure that this passes. Because we really need stability and we need to maintain this really excellent program, one that is far better than I think people in this community really understand. Over the last 14 years, I've had the opportunity to work in any number of districts across Northern California. There is no high school district that has the facilities that we have and the breadth of program that we have for such a diverse community. It's worth fighting for. And I want my grandchildren to have the same level of program that my daughter had when she was here at Redwood and that exists today. So I'm encouraging you to take whatever risk that you need to do to maintain excellence. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment on the parcel tax?
Hi, I'm Karen Lobica from Kentfield. So after the board communication that went out 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago from Mary explaining that there were 2 options on the table, option A, option B, I had a lot of phone calls come to me, emails come to me, as well as I went out and spoke to about 25 people. And I'm just letting you, these are parents in our community, Redwood or TAM parents, as well as people that are older empty nesters, may not have had kids go through the district. 100% of the response was to go for option B with the $149 supplemental tax. Just wanted to pass that on to you. People felt that based on perhaps incorrect public opinion of what has been going on, that they wanted to invest in a shorter period of time at a lesser dollar amount to allow the opportunity for getting the house in order, so to speak, getting a permanent superintendent hired, having the budget healthy again with this supplemental tax. And I think there's an opportunity for the board to also, with the board and the superintendent, to communicate and correct some of these public opinions that are out there, that are absolutely incorrect. So I just wanted to pass on that feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. It's a little after 7. Are there any other comments? This concludes the public hearing, and now we will move to the next agenda item under trustee considerations. And I believe, are you, Val, are you doing this with? Yeah.
So based on the conversations that we had at our last meeting and the presentation that we heard, you asked that we bring back some options in terms of looking at the success of our parcel tax. So what you have in your board packet is the resolution that you passed in April, which is 1714B. You have a very similar resolution, but with a 10-year term only in your packet, which is maybe it's an option 1B or something, but it is 18.5. And 18.2 in your packet is a supplemental approach with the $149 for 4 years' time. Tonight we have someone from Sabrina from TBWB and William Tunick, who's the attorney from Dennis Waller Kelly, that has assisted with the Resolution 18.2 and Resolution 18.5, should the board have any questions.
Do any board members have any questions or comments?
I have a question on 18.2, and I'm wondering about the escalator on 18.2. Yes, thank you. I've had a ton of out-of-town guests staying at my house, and I just want to make sure I've got it. Where are the terms for the, is there an escalator for this?
Should be a 3.
Is it 3%?
William? Or do supplementals not have the escalator?
Good evening, Board. Sorry, William Tunick with
Thank
DWCAT.
you.
It should be, I think, let's see, we're looking at 18.2. Let me double check. It'd be on page B2. That's where it shows up on the other one. So it's, yeah, all the way to the bottom. Apologize, Bob.
Where the question is. Keep going. Exhibit B. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. So B2,
There
right?
you go.
It'll be that last sentence. So it's the 3%.
Okay.
The very end.
And that's the identical language on that is in both of the resolutions.
Barbara, Chuck, Michael, any questions?
What is the third resolution, which is 18-5? What is?
18-5 is the renewal of the current parcel tax with $149 additional for a 10-year term.
Rather than the 12 years which we had originally considered.
Correct.
I'm going to talk about this. So we've had a couple weeks to think about this, and at first I was not inclined to go with just a supplemental. I have run a parcel tax campaign before, and I was concerned that if we didn't put the renewal in at this time, along with a $149 increase, that the strain on the volunteer force to do this again in a short amount of time would be detrimental. And so, you know, we only had a little bit of time to think about that at the last board meeting, and so I've let that percolate. And I am now feeling more inclined, given the data that we got off the second survey, and you know, some of the reasons that we heard at public comment, to lean more towards going for the 149 for 4 years and get that money, see what kind of shape we're in, what our enrollment numbers look like. We'll have new leadership in place, a new superintendent, and a full board. I don't know who's going to be sitting on this board, but we'll be looking different in 2 years than we do right now. And we might not have such a hard time mounting another parcel tax campaign to renew our existing parcel tax if we have, the trust and confidence and respect from the community that we need to pass anything. So that, I've shown you my cards there. I am leaning more towards a 149 supplemental instead of trying to renew that 293 tonight.
I'm with you, Laura. I've thought about it too. I mean, when it came to us 2 weeks ago, it wasn't an option. Didn't have time to really process it, and I did. And in view of economic uncertainty, although we have we have certainly a roaring market, but I think that's debatable, or at least it's questionable as the markets are. The 4 years, I'm with you on that. I would support that.
I have to say, I really, really, really want the whole enchilada for 10 years, as Mimi suggested. But the numbers that we got at the last board meeting, and the downward trend, were really sobering to me. And I think the risk of losing is so catastrophic that, I'm convinced that we should do the 4-year $149 one. I think it'd be nice to just put it all into one package, have it done for 10 years, but those numbers were scary.
Michael, would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
You can go first.
I think I echo much of what's been said. I, too, have given a lot of thought, and unlike other situations where you can look at relative risk and pros and cons, however you want to evaluate it, when we look at what it's at stake, kind of takes a lot of things off the table. And that there is so much at stake, we have so much to protect, and we are, we need this additional revenue, and we need it next year. And so any other concerns that we have and we've discussed, we'll address those. They pale in comparison to if the parcel tax doesn't pass. What we have in front of us is two polling results, and looking at the error rate, looking at the historical polling rates with other districts and how the actual votes came in. I just can't ignore that. Still means that I'm just like the rest of you. I'm dedicated to pound the pavement when the time comes, and I think, too, it wasn't originally planned this way, but it was fortuitous to be able to hear from the communications expert, because it just reminded me that this district is in good shape, and that, as he even put it, this was not a surprise. We've been planning this, but clearly that message hasn't gone out, and now we're dealing potentially with that, why the numbers came back the way they did. So we've got a number of things we need to tackle. I know we can do it. And it's so important that we keep this district whole and minimize any disruption. And I'm ready to tackle the next one. And so I too appreciate the time that you took with the attorneys to give us these other options, and I also will be voting for the supplemental 4-year term. And now I'll hand it to you, Michael.
Great.
Thank you.
So I want to just talk a little bit about why we're here. That is, why are we facing the fiscal situation that we're currently facing? as opposed to just talking about the politics, because I think for a variety of reasons, the message, the very real message doesn't get out. The reason that we have budgetary challenges is because we're in a situation of extraordinary enrollment growth. I'd like to see that phrase, enrollment growth, appear in every communication that we make. In the last 10 years, we had 3,823 students in 2008, 2009. This year, 2018, 2019, we're expecting 5,050 students approximately. That's an increase of over 1,200 students, or 32% in the size of our student body over the last 10 years. Okay, we are about teaching and learning. So in order to be able to teach, well, first of all, we're a public school, right? We don't turn people away. We're not a private school. We don't shut our doors. We take all comers and we provide a fabulous education for them. So, but really what we're about is we're about personnel. We're about teachers and counselors and support staff to be able to support that extra 32% or over 1,200 students over the course of the last 10 years. And we have increased our certificated staff. Certificated means teachers and counselors, from a staff of 243 full-time equivalents to over 313. So approximately 70 additional teachers we've hired, teachers and counselors, over the last 10 years to help provide a fabulous education for our students. That's a 29% increase. That costs money. It just simply does. This is a story about enrollment growth. We are attracting more families with school-age kids to our district because families want to come here and send their kids to our schools. We have great schools. That's what's going on, okay? And the rest of it, we can talk all about politics, all we want, and what do the polls say, but that's the reality of why we're here. We're here because we have 1,200 more students than we had 10 years ago. And the projections, and we've done projections, right? And we know that this trend of increasing numbers of students is going to increase based on the experts who we've had do our enrollment projections through at least the school year 2020, 2021, when it's supposed to even out at roughly 5,300 to 5,400 students. At which time, it's not going to drop. Rather, we're going to be roughly stable. That's what the projections are saying. So we know that if we want to maintain, we know that we're going to need this money for more than 4 years, and we know that we're going to still have to teach these kids. We're just going to have to do it. Okay, so we have this secular issue that we're dealing with. Now, there are other components that increase our costs too, which are also outside of our control, but the bottom line is this is about enrollment growth. So the other thing that members of the public and voters need to understand is that we have roughly 10% of our student body that are special needs kids, right? These are kids with disabilities, kids who are on what we call IEPs, or individual education plans. And it's just more expensive to teach these special needs kids than it is frequently to teach other kids. Now, this is one of our duties. This is one of the things that we do so well, frankly, as a school district. That's why families move that's part of the reason why families move here, because we provide great support for kids who need additional help, in addition to providing all our great AP and honors classes. But if you just take 10%, right, of those additional over 1,200 students, that's another 120 special education students. These are rough numbers. But you just get the sense, right? You need to understand, why are we here? Why do we have the budgetary challenges? So the other component of that, which I know the people who've been coming to our meetings clearly understand this, is that we do not get more money from the state based on the numbers of students, right? We've had this discussion. Mimi, actually, Willard, who has been extremely well informed about this, has spoken about this and attended many of our meetings, right? We're funded based on property taxes. We're not funded based on average daily attendance. So we're not getting more money from the state on a proportionate basis as our students increase. So the community, that's the message that we need to get out. That's why we're here. I know I'm talking to the choir here because everybody at this table understands that, but I don't think we can say it enough. The second thing that we've done, the second thing that's important to say is we have, in fact, taken a variety of steps to restrain our budget to the extent that we can, and within those parameters of having to hire all these additional teachers. So one of the things that we've done with respect to special education is we had a consultant come in and analyze the efficiency with which we're providing special education, and we opened up a special day class at Tamalpais, a community education class where we were paying outside providers like the county to provide services to some of our special education kids. And we've opened a class that's allowed us to teach those kids and provide a fabulous education for them here, closer to home. And that has saved us approximately $800,000 a year, and frankly, allowed families who have special need kids to keep their kids closer to home, which is just great. We had a print shop. We had an antiquated print shop, and we had a couple of staff members that was being underutilized. We closed the print shop, which saved us more than $200,000 a year. We installed solar panels. We did a significant study about energy costs, and we installed solar panels at Redwood High School. You can see on the parking lot, and the long-term energy savings more than pay for the expense, and over time we're going to save millions of dollars in energy costs as a result of that. And last year we went through a process that ended up having us have budget cuts of approximately $1.8 million, right, which included suspending the teacher leader program, and which included eliminating certain educational coaching programs that we have. Now, is there more that we can do to cut spending? Yes. I'm going to say that again. Is there more that we can do to cut spending? Yes. But all that said, we're here faced with these issues because we have significantly more students than we had in the past. That's the way it is. That is the number one factor driving this. Okay? And I know that the Parcel Tax Committee is going to make that message really loud and clear about how well we're teaching our kids, increasing numbers of our kids. But I think the problem, my objection, turning now to the political issue about how long should this be, I'm fine with it being 10 years. I take Mimi and Laura's comments to heart. I think 12 years is too long. I got it. I think $149 is, as Bill Levinson said, pretty darn targeted to maintaining our current programs, right? It's roughly $5.1 million, right? We know that we've got about in terms of spending down our reserves, which we've been doing, we've got a $6 million hole to cover, and we can certainly do that by tightening things up over the next year. So I think it meets sort of what I'll now call, I think he's gone, is Bill gone? We'll call the Bill Levinson target for now. But we know here that because of enrollment, which is going to continue to increase and then level out, we know we're going to need more money than even the current parcel tax is going to provide. And I think we ought to be, in my mind, we ought to be frank with the voters and say, this is where we are. You want to continue to have a great school system for all that we provide for the kids in the community, and that we need, and it's not going to be over in 4 years. And so I think we should be aspirational. And I know we have a great message. We have a great message. We are a fabulous community resource. Fabulous. These schools are great. I didn't come back to serve as a trustee after my kids graduated, right, because I got nothing else to do on these evenings. Right? I know how important this is. This is the most important thing a local community does, which is teach our kids. The most important. And we can sell that because we're right. And I think we ought to go out for 10 years. And that's what I'm going to vote for.
Do any other board members have anything in addition you'd like to share?
I wanted to thank our interim superintendents for answering the questions that we asked at the last board meeting. And included in those answers was input from the campaign committee, I think, indicating that they were in favor of the 149 at 4 years. Is that right? I was trying to pull up the email that I got.
That's based on the conversations with TBWB and the committee chairs. And Sabrina's nodding her head, yes.
Any more discussion before I ask for a motion?
Yeah, a question for our two superintendents. How do you think having the 4-year parcel tax with the next parcel tax coming up in 2 years and the uncertainty that throws into the situation would affect a search for a new superintendent?
I think that the possibility of a board election in November, and we may have new trustees, understanding that we have to go for a parcel tax again, those are opportunities for a new superintendent. I don't think it's going to detract from people who really want to be here. I've already had people call me and say, I want to be the superintendent here. I think Michael stated it well. This is a destination position. I was honored to be superintendent here for 5 years. Like Michael, we have other things to do, but coming back here and working with this board, working with this community is an honor, and I think you're going to have no trouble recruiting top-notch people regardless of the situations that are here. I don't know, Valerie, if you agree with that?
No, I agree.
Another way of looking at it is I'd be concerned if a superintendent didn't want to work for our district because of that. It'd make me be a little concerned about his or hers capabilities.
We certainly
So it
have
might be,
challenges.
yeah.
Compared to some other school districts, this is a wonderful destination position.
Barbara, I can't see you. Are you asking to say something? I kind of see your head.
You know, I don't think I can top what Michael is saying, but just to remind myself, we're a family of, our family has been employed in this district as educators, many of you know, since I started in '68. So our family's been committed to this district as employees, but our daughter graduated from Redwood. Our children have graduated from these schools. And as I said, as a teacher, when I face parents, there's not enough money. We could never have afforded to send our child to a school as capable as giving our child so many opportunities as Redwood High School. These are the programs that we offer here. One could argue from my era, gee, they look kind of fluffy. Some of these are fluffy. They're not fluffy anymore. When we looked at the wellness program 3 years ago, I didn't vote for it. Not because I didn't agree with the need, because the need we have seen now is tremendous. But it was a concern about the cost. And now I sit here telling you, we have to fund these programs. We all know that. These are not extras. These are what we need to keep our children safe and healthy and educated. So we have to find, and we are, many of us are working at many other levels to find other sources of revenue to get legislation passed to give us support for these other areas of cost for which we do not have any control right now. So we've got a lot to do, but I don't think there's any disagreement about the value in maintaining and supporting this extraordinary opportunity that we give to the world. Our graduates are contributing to the world in many, many ways. We all know that. So yes, please, for the grandchildren. But I would still stay with the 4-year.
Valerie's going to give you a budget calendar later on, and it's an assurance to you that what Michael said is what we're going to do, at least in this interim period, is to continue to look for cost savings that go along with the current effort on a parcel tax. So those are things we can do, and we'll pledge to you that we'll be good stewards of that.
Thank you. Would any board member like to entertain a motion?
What is it?
I move to adopt Resolution 18-2, a supplemental parcel tax for 4 years at $149 and a 3% escalator.
I second it.
Is this a roll call vote, since it's a resolution? Okay, Mary?
Ms. Owens?
Aye.
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Futterman?
So I have a point of order or clarification. So I'm not going to vote for the 4-year period because I think it's a mistake.
Right.
Well, I don't think it's a mistake. I think it's not the best decision. But I don't want to be on record certainly as not supporting the parcel tax, right? So I guess one of the questions I have is how is this reported, in, what does it look like on the ballot, if at all? I mean, I'm not, educate me a little bit about sort of the legal component of the political situation, if you will.
Sure. Well, from a legal perspective, the vote does not appear on the ballot. What will appear on the ballot is simply the full text, so that the Exhibit B and then Exhibit A, the 75 words, goes next to yes or no. So the vote would be reported, obviously, as part of the minutes from the board meeting, identifying each board member and how they voted, but it doesn't then translate over to the ballot specifically.
So let me just do this. I move to amend the resolution and to delete references to 4 years, if you will, to make it a 10-year term, so that it's $149 for 10 years. $149 plus the renewal of the existing parcel tax for a total period of 10 years.
So that the rest of us vote differently?
Well, you may not, maybe I won't get a second.
Okay, do I have a second?
Isn't that just
How can we do that?
resolution?
We've already got this on the, we've already, how does this work, Superintendent?
That's resolution 18.5.
How do?
Is that resolution 18.5?
Yeah, that's 18.5 is 10 years,
So-
149.
Okay, then I move to amend the resolution by deleting every word and replacing it with every word in resolution 18.5. That way it's clear.
I mean, okay, Robert's Rules of Order, this is.
I need to.
Okay, forget it. I withdraw it. I'm going to vote no.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lundgren Harlander?
Aye,
Pass.
thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thanks you for all the hard work, superintendents, and thank you, Mr. Tunick, for coming. So now our next agenda item is what I believe Walt referenced. I'm glad to see this. Discuss budget planning calendar.
So this is a draft, and you usually receive this when we start thinking about the following year's budget in January or February. But what we've done is just put together a draft for you of what this planning process moving forward will look like regarding budget development and specifically the deficit reduction plan. Walt and I have committed that we will speak to you on the budget at every board meeting coming up, so we wanted you to see a little bit about what that looks like. You know that we are putting together a fiscal advisory committee. We hope to get applications out for that at the end of the week, beginning of next week, and to receive those back in short order. And so that we are able to have our first fiscal advisory committee either by the end of August or the beginning of September. So you'll see that September is a lot of gathering input, a lot of meeting with constituent groups. We want to make sure that the process that we put into place is inclusive of input from staff, from parents, from constituents in the community. And you heard Tom and Stephen discuss various strategies for how important it is to communicate. So the budget calendar actually goes through June of next year, and I've had Terry take a look at this. On the last page, you'll see these are really basic budget deficit reduction strategies. These are the things that you have been doing. They're just put together. You're looking at revenue enhancement when you're talking about the parcel tax. You are leveraging local developer fees. we're looking at how our foundations and our parent groups can help. So that's the whole revenue enhancement piece. Budget deficit reduction doesn't stand alone. You have to do it with revenue enhancement. Michael referenced the beginning of the CEC
Yes.
programs. You started a program in order to save costs by having to send children elsewhere for education. So educating our own students is one of the strategies as well, looking at how can we provide our own service versus having to go out for other services. Expenditure controls, these are the kinds of things we started talking about last time, looking at how are we tightening our purchasing procedures so that we're making sure that we're purchasing things that are just absolutely necessary right now. And since our discussion from the last meeting, we've gone back to the purchase orders that you were looking at last time, and we've discussed what does it look like to do 5 to 10% reductions across the board. And we got a pretty positive response on that. So we're pleased, and we will be continuing to look for ways to tighten our belts, restrain spending, as Michael put, and be able to bring back to you, and this is a very aggressive timeline, but we would hope to be able to bring back to you by first interim a multi-year projection that is not in the red that third year out, so that we really can look at as many strategies. Now, that's some of this obviously is going to depend on the success of the parcel tax, but we may have to put two options in front of you in November. You know, here's what it looks like with the parcel tax, here's what it looks like without the parcel tax. But we'll be looking at these things, we'll be looking at them at Cabinet, we'll be looking at them when the principals come back, and asking them to meet with their staffs, as well as to have representatives on the Fiscal Advisory Committee. Any questions or something that might be missing that we should be thinking about? Again, this is just a draft.
I have a question for you, and that is the Fiscal Advisory Group. Is that what is the status of that group? Is it being formed right now? I know that we wanted them to congeal and have several meetings before
So
the
there
November.
are a list of potential members of that, or at least the stakeholder groups are listed on that. We'll be sending out a letter inviting people to apply. We may have more people interested than we have spaces on the committee, and I think we'd want a committee of anywhere from 15 to 20 is what we're targeting. So Laura, we're hoping to get that letter out in the next 7 to 8 days.
Great.
Inviting applications.
So, the Fiscal Advisory Committee, so just an observation, Laura and I having attended, I know Karen was there, having attended the meetings, there was a certain amount of frustration expressed by some of the parents at not having sort of as great a handle on the information, if you will, which is natural as staff members with respect to where are the areas potentially for savings, where, people who work here, have a better idea of where we can save money, obviously, than some of the parents. But that was a frustration that, and ultimately at the end of this year, the parent members, I think the consensus around the table is the parent members said, staff made a recommendation, and we said we're just going to follow whatever staff said. But I think that's very understandable. But I think in my mind there was like a little bit of frustration associated with that as well. And so as you're thinking about sort of educating people to try to get parents in particular up to speed, I think that's really important in terms of plowing that ground early.
Thank you, and we did speak with Tom about that prior to this, and identified that educating people about the Budget 101 is really important.
Yeah, but it's more than Budget 101. It's like, where are the areas where potentially, savings can be achieved, right? So what does staffing, maybe, staffing ratios mean, or whatever the issue is. Anyway, I don't want to belabor it, but that's an issue that would be you just need to be aware of it. It sounds like you are. That's great.
Thank you.
to say that out loud.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me, is first interim in September? December.
Is this draft going to be, it's a living document so that we can reference it periodically, or will you just be reporting to us on, I mean, what do we do with this calendar going forward?
So you approved a budget development calendar in January or February, but it only took you through June. So I could bring this back to you after discussing it more in cabinet tomorrow and have you actually accept this as the budget development calendar. And yes, you can reference it in draft or final.
Is it useful to have the board approve this by motion? I mean, is it necessary, or is it useful?
It's not necessary at this point. It is necessary when you begin budget development for the following year in February. It's part of what you do. You accept the budget development calendar.
Do you think that this would?
And so the last part of this, from February forward, looks like what you would have adopted last February.
I'm wondering if we do change this from draft to something that's, we agreed that we're abiding by, if that would help when first interim comes and the Marin County Office of Education, and we know that they're looking at what we are doing as a district to address our fiscal challenges. Would something that's not in draft form help our argument?
Yeah, this is the beginning of it. The county office would like to see a plan, which doesn't necessarily mean the exact cuts or specifics 2 years out. They just want to see a plan. So fiscal advisory committee is a plan. Having a calendar that we attempt to follow in terms of involving constituent groups is a plan. One of the things that we might do at the first fiscal advisory, and we haven't even really talked about the agenda yet, is determine priorities and then do what Michael has suggested, which is, where are the areas for potential savings? And if we can put dollar signs next to those things and present that plan to the county office, that's, I think, what they're looking for. As well as things like looking at reserve policy.
We're also looking at stabilizing the business office, the staffing. We need stability there so that we have consistent leadership as well as consultant.
So we could bring back, potentially, we're going to be delving into this tomorrow at Cabinet, but we could bring back a plan that might be something that the county office would be specifically looking for.
So, yeah, I think I would like it if it were just an agenda item for cabinet tomorrow, so you could talk about what positions us well, if leaving it in draft form is what we should do, or what we should do with this.
Okay.
Do you need anything else from us before we recess? Okay, we're not adjourning, we're recessing to closed session.